Work, thrive, lead, persist, communicate.
Portrait of a Graduate. Welcome to our podcast.
The Springfield Public Schools Portrait of a Graduate is the community's vision of essential skills and attributes that students will learn before they graduate. It is intended to empower Springfield schools and the community to reimagine teaching and learning inside and outside of schools. More than 200 people attended our community events. At least 700 educators participated in educator conversations. Around 50 student leaders participated, and about 1,400 people reviewed draft copies of the portrait and provided feedback. It took more than a year to engage those stakeholders, more than 2,000 of them, in conversations where district officials listened to their hopes and dreams for Springfield youth. The result of those conversations is the Portrait of a Graduate, a single document that lists central skills and attributes that Springfield schools, along with the community, will help students develop. The next step in our work is continued engagement with educators, students, and community members, and utilizing the portrait as a blueprint that will guide the district's strategic plan for the next 5 years. A strategic plan that defines new ways to inspire and empower our students.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of POG, the podcast. I am your host, Azell Cavaan, and I am so excited to talk about our topic for today. Our topic for today is joyful learning. It is critical for student engagement, and that's what we are going to talk about today. And we are joined by some members of a school that have been a part of Portrait of a Graduate since its inception. They are one of our first tier schools, or pilot schools, if you would like to call it that. So I will introduce who our guests are today, and we will get right to it. We are joined by Mrs. Rhonda Jacobs, who is the principal for all of our alternative schools, and we'll hear a little bit more about what that means in just a moment. And we are also joined by Mr. Robert Porter, who is a site administrator of one of those alternative schools, and we'll hear from him directly. And most excitedly, I'm happy to introduce two students from Springfield Public Day High School. One is a senior, Jovante, and the other is in 11th grade, Absalon Cardona. So welcome to everyone. Mrs. Jacobs, let's start with you. Can you just explain for us what is meant by the term alternative school and what makes them so special for us here in the district?
So an alternative school is a non-traditional school. What that means is we are offering an opportunity for students to be educated in a classroom setting that could be smaller classroom size, and it could also be where additional social emotional supports are provided. We also have a different pathway on our college campuses where students are earning high school credits and college credits at the same time. So it is just very different than your traditional school. And it's offering students an opportunity to just meet success in the platform that they need to receive that support.
That's great. So it does give students an alternative to traditional means of education, because this environment may be more suited towards the way that they learn or the needs that they have.
Absolutely.
So it's great that we have these schools available to our students. So we're talking about joyful learning today, and I heard you talking about it in a Portrait of a Graduate meeting not very long ago, and the excitement and the conviction that you had around it was just, it was palpable. So can you talk a little bit about what educators mean when they use that term, joyful learning, and what does it mean to you personally?
So for educators and for me, joyful learning is an opportunity for students and the faculty, the teachers, to engage in shared interest and purpose of learning. And what I mean by that is, just imagine a student comes to school and it's just simple, basic ELA, math, and science. That when you just hear the term, it just sounds so basic. But just imagine students coming to school and they're excited about the learning, excited about the concepts, excited about collaborating with other students and their teachers, and really looking forward to a wonderful outcome, a product that they're able to finish
Yeah.
and display, enjoying themselves, having fun.
It just makes sense because in life, that's what we do. When we are doing something that we love, we are more engaged in it, no matter what it is, from gardening
Absolutely.
to reading, whatever it may be. So bringing that whole concept to learning, I can see where this fits in the portrait of a graduate, which is looking to reimagine education.
Absolutely.
So, Mr. Porter, you are the site administrator for Springfield Public Day High School, where you have been engaged in exciting students and building excitement amongst students for their subjects for some time. Is there a formula or something that you look to achieve when you're approaching teaching and learning using this idea?
So one of the things that's kind of foundational is the work around identity, agency, and interest. Let's just think about it. We want enjoyment, we want engagement. So let's start off with identity. Let's get to know who students are and who are we as it relates to students in this work that we do here at the high school. The interest. What is it that the student likes to do? And what is it that I like to do? And really being able to come together and share those moments. And then also looking at that agency. Let's give some choice, because there are some things I might not like to do, but do I have the opportunity to do those things and kind of explore those things? So really kind of highlighting that aspect in our project-based assessments. And so it's that formula and that connection of getting to know students, building relationships, and then being able to allow for choices for students.
I mean, I liked school, but I can't ever recall a time where it was, the assignment was getting to know me and what did I like and sort of building an assignment around that. So even as much as I like school, I can imagine how much more exciting it would have been if I was able to do something like that. Can you give us some examples, some real life examples of, of this joyful learning, what it is that you're talking about that you've done at Springfield Public Day High?
So one of our teachers, we've been focused on project-based assessments. And so one of our teachers developed an Earth Spheres project. And so you would think, okay, traditionally you get kind of one choice as it relates to that. So the teacher outlined it and said, these are the major topics we're going to look at: biosphere, geosphere, hydrosphere, and atmosphere. And we learned about, the students learned about all these topics, and it's like, okay, how can we go about displaying our learning? And so with this, students had the opportunity in 13 choices. And some of those choices was creating a bumper sticker, an online article, a vocabulary puzzle, a board game, a model, a video blog, and or web quest. So this is one of those platforms where the students really had all these options to be able to explore. And then even looking at our journalism, in our journalism, we were able to kind of capture some standards that, talk about collaborating and discussing and presenting information and using digital media from the speaking and learning standards, and from language being able to revise and edit, and then from the writing standard, being able to maintain a style that is appropriate. And Azell, you know all about this aspect of engaging with audiences. And students were able to do this via the Cyclone Current. They were able to create surveys and do interviews with staff and be able to create a final product as it relates to that.
Wow, how exciting. That is fun. I mean, bumper stickers, board games, are you able to measure in any way, or maybe you have anecdotal information about how kids are engaged in learning when it's something like this versus maybe what it was, 3 years ago in your schools or before you started to take on this perspective around teaching and learning?
Representation matters. So if a student sees themselves and has voice and choice, how powerful is that? Them being able to decide on this, being able to engage in a project. They might be the only one working on a particular project and be able to really say, this is my interest. I like this aspect because it's hands-on. I'm able to kind of do this. Other students might decide, you know what, I am more so, I like the traditional method and be able to just write my paper, I'm going to write my paper. But being able to do voice and choice, we definitely have seen a higher level of increase of that joyful learning and that student engagement with the projects.
That is great. Let's hear from the students themselves. And since Jovante is the senior, we'll start with you, Jovante. Is there a project that you did that stands out in your mind as one that brought you a lot of fun as well as made you learn new information?
There's one project that I did in one of my I think my 7th period class, and we were writing a newspaper for the school. And we did a lot of, it took weeks to finish the newspaper, but we did a lot of different things for this project. I have the newspaper in my hand right now. We did things like trying foods that, regular people would never try. We tried crickets. We reviewed foods, and we did a staff spotlight on one of the teachers in the school, and asked them certain questions, why they start working at the school, or where they're from, regular questions that you would ask an employee that you're getting a work, trying to apply for a job.
Yeah.
So,
yep.
And we did a Hispanic Heritage Month. We did many different things in this, but it was interesting because it was so many different things, and it was mostly like interviewing people and seeing what they had to offer to the table, but also it's just so much new information, and it's not just me staring at a screen and looking at a teacher and being bored all day. It's something different, something unique, and something that keeps my interest. Something that keeps me paying attention and what makes me want to do it more and more. And I find it interesting to write a newspaper because I never would have done it before, but to actually see how it works, actually to see the fundamentals of journalism. And that's my class, journalism, writing a newspaper, seeing what's going on inside the school, asking questions, gaining information. It's different, but it's cool for me. And I actually like this new way of learning.
So you actually did what I'm doing right now. I'm conducting an interview of you, and you did this in your school of your teachers and of your other students. So it is actually very much real life scenarios. And we'll follow up on this, but I'm just wondering if maybe one of these podcasts, you can do the interview. We'll figure out what we have coming up before you graduate, and you can really put those skills that you learned to practice if you're up for it.
I'll think about it. Definitely.
Okay, you think about it. I'm not putting you on the spot, but the offer is there and I'll follow back. So Absalom, let's talk about one of the projects that you did that you really enjoyed.
One of the projects that I did and I really enjoyed was as he was talking about when we were able to make a geosphere. I made a volcano. I kind of messed up on it, so I wasn't able to make it erupt, but I did make the volcano, and it looked really similar to a volcano. And it was pretty fun because I want to be an architect. So when I want to be an architect, you have to mold and you have to see how well you can make it to your imagination. And when you're making it to your imagination, you have to visualize it. So me being able to see how I was able to make a volcano from clay to hand, and see how I was able to transform into a volcano was extremely interesting and fun. And yeah, it was like pretty cool. That's another fun thing to do. And there's a lot of projects and classes that you can do, such as hands-on. So yeah, I also did a lipid with the same teacher. We were learning about lipids and splitting lipids and protein and stuff. And it was very interesting because it was something different that I've never did before. So it kept me very interested onto the questions and onto what we were doing on the project. So those are some fun projects that we also did. So yeah.
Those do sound like really fun projects, and the content is really deep content that you're learning in each of those areas. So That's great. That's really great. And Mr. Porter, I was wondering if you could just speak a little bit about the importance of being able to successfully make a mistake, because Absalom said that his volcano didn't erupt, but that's not a failure. That's a success in another area. So can you just talk about what lessons there are when students venture out and attempt something and it maybe doesn't turn out the way they planned?
And that's one of the joys that we have here, is that being able to take that risk, take the academic risk, and be able to see the process. As Absalon was talking about being an architect and going into design, sometimes your design does not necessarily translate model-wise. Then you have to go back, and that's what engineers do. And being able to do that critical analysis, being able to say, okay, we tried this way. It didn't work. Let's try another way. And this is something that's definitely transferable in many different arenas. And we do it as teachers. Sometimes we think we created the best lesson in the world, and it flops. Students are like, oh, boo, get off the stage. We say, okay, let's not do that again. Or we think, let's try this. I've never done this before. Let's try this. Okay, it was successful. A lot of high level of engagement. And that's where that psychological safety is at. Being able to have, enough of a relationship with the adults and adults with students to be able to take that risk and saying, okay, we're on this journey together, and we're going to learn from each other, and we're going to learn what works and what doesn't work. And if it doesn't work, let's say why. Let's look at that why, and let's see what we can do to recreate it. I think that's one of definitely the blessings of the alternative schools is we're a small community. And as we're a small community, we have those relationships. We're able to bounce ideas off of it. And so even with the teachers, when they started taking on these projects, initially the teacher had 25 options. And when she presented the 25 options, it was overwhelming for her and for the students. And then she says, okay, maybe, agency is important, but I have to scale this down. And that's when she brought it down to 13. And then in even refining it, using tools that is interest surveys to say, okay, this group of students, they're interested in this. So I know for choices, I'm going to go and do these 10. And it really just becomes better for the student and for the teacher.
That's great. And I know that in all of our schools, there are those teacher-student relationships, but in an environment like the alternative schools, where just by design and nature, it's so much smaller, it seems like there's even more opportunities for that. So, Mrs. Porter, I wanted to ask you, speaking about taking a risk, it seems like teachers are given more flexibility under this innovative teaching technique than they are under the standard ways of teaching. So how do you, as an administrator, come to terms with the autonomy that teachers have, knowing that they and you are ultimately still responsible for meeting educational targets set by the district and even by the state?
And
Was that Mr. Porter? Yes.
No, that's for you. That's for you.
You said Mrs. Porter.
Oh, I
was like, Mrs. Porter. I was like, I guess my wife is not here, but I can answer on her behalf. Go ahead,
Mr. Porter's like, no, my wife does not work here.
So the expectations haven't changed. We still have to support and adhere to what the district requirements and state requirements are. Teachers are going to have the autonomy to be creative around what the curriculum is, and they can find other supplemental materials to support the curriculum. So, I mean, we're still preparing for MCAS. We are still supporting and following curriculum that's provided for all contents. It's what we add to it and what we bring, and with the creativity to still, we improvise a little bit, but we're still meeting and addressing the standards that are expected to be addressed. So, and our teachers know that they have the autonomy to be creative. We are encouraging it. It's talked about way before Portrait of a Graduate, because we've always wanted our teachers to be innovative and creative for our students. We've always known that it's extremely important to interest students and getting them to be interested in being here with us during the day. 6 hours of awake time. But nothing has changed in regards to state and district expectations. It's just being creative and getting there.
Right. And I think as we close out, I'll go back to something that I mentioned when we were just starting, is that you are one of the early adopters of the Portrait of a Graduate as a principal. What drove you to be involved in the Portrait of a Graduate in such a major way from the ground floor?
and I know all my administrators, we want our students to enjoy school. We want it to be a place where they want to come. And when I thought about Portrait of a Graduate, and of course the introduction, what it's going to take for us to be innovative, just simply reimagining school differently, I felt like we were already doing that. We're already doing it. Now let's get involved. Let's be one of the first schools to get involved and learn more about what else is out there. How more can we be more creative and do whatever it takes to get our students to be successful in the end, and do it with the mindset of, okay, the district has given us the okay to do it with what we've already been doing. Let's do it better.
Right.
Let's do more of it. And I can say that even though we've been doing it, we were doing project-based learning, we were doing professional development with our staff for, I want to say, at least 5 years ago. Is that right, Mr. Porter? Even though we've been doing it, I feel like because it's now a district matter, I really feel like we've expanded our practices even more. So it's a win-win for the alternative schools.
That's great. That's great. I noticed that the term project-based learning has been tossed around a couple of times during our conversation. And just for our listeners, I would like to say that this is a topic that POG, the podcast, covered. It was our very first topic. So if you'd like to learn more about that, please just visit this first podcast that we ever did, which is available on springfieldpublicschools.com. Just click on Portrait of a Graduate. So I would like to thank all of our guests for being here today, especially Jovante and Absalom. It's been great hearing about your projects, and our audience can't see you, but I can see you. And just the way that you talked about your projects, I could see the light, in your faces when you talked about it. So thank you for being here. And this concludes our topic of joyful learning here on POG, the podcast.
Portrait of a Graduate, the podcast, is a production of the Springfield Public Schools Office of Communication. Azell, Cavaan, executive producer and host. Christian Polanco, production manager. Ewan Tran, a senior at Putnam Academy, production intern. Theme music written by Marcos Carreros, music teacher at the Springfield Conservatory of the Arts, and performed by the Conservatory of the Arts School Band.
And I'm Davion Gatson-Cog.
And I'm Gabriella from Glenwood.
Thank you for listening to our podcast. Have a great day.